I was never your placeholder, Gray. Her voice cut through the ballroom before the orchestra could strike the first chord. The violinist's bow froze mid-air. The pianist's hands hovered above ivory keys. A sharp gasp rippled through the hall. Hundreds of guests turned at once. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a sea of couture gowns and tailored tuxedos. Cameras from private media crews swiveled toward the center aisle. And there she stood, Lily, 6 months pregnant, uninvited by dignity, invited by cruelty. Emerald silk clung to her form with quiet authority. Her hand rested lightly over her stomach, not in weakness, but in protection. Her chin lifted. Her eyes locked on the groom. Gray Bradford, billionaire, tech magnate, tonight's celebrated groom. His smile had been polished for headlines. Now, it vanished. Silence pressed against the walls of the Hudson River estate. Investors, politicians, CEOs, every elite figure in Manhattan watched a moment no PR team could control. Lily took one step forward. You don't get to rewrite our history to make yourself look powerful. The microphone trembled slightly in her hand, but her voice did not. Across the aisle, the bride's fingers tightened around her bouquet. The wedding had not even begun, and already it was breaking. Gray Bradford did not move. For a man who built billion-dollar deals with a single signature, he suddenly looked stripped of language. Lily, he muttered, low enough for only the front rows to hear. But the cameras caught it. The bride beside him, Natalia, forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her jaw tightened. The bouquet trembled just slightly in her grip. What is she doing here? Natalia whispered sharply. Gray didn't answer, because he knew. He had sent the invitation. Across the ballroom, murmurs began to spread. That's his ex-wife. She looks pregnant. Why would she agree to perform? Phones tilted discreetly. A senator leaned toward a hedge fund manager. A media executive lowered her champagne glass mid-sip. This wasn't part of the program. The orchestra conductor glanced between the couple and Lily, unsure whether to restart the music or step away entirely. Gray finally stepped down from the altar platform. His polished shoes echoed against marble floors. You shouldn't have come, he said under his breath when he reached her. Her eyes held steady. You asked me to... That landed harder than a slap. His gaze dropped to her stomach. He inhaled sharply. You moved on. Her response was immediate. So did you. Behind them, Natalia's composure began to crack. The perfect bride, the curated union, the merger of influence and image, all of it hanging by a thread, and every guest could feel it. The room stopped pretending this was a celebration. Private media crews adjusted their lenses without waiting for permission. A producer near the back whispered, "Keep rolling." No one wanted to miss what this might become. Executives who had flown in from Silicon Valley exchanged tight looks. A venture capitalist quietly texted his assistant. A political donor shifted in his seat, already calculating headlines. Gray's chief of staff stepped forward, then paused. There was no protocol for this. Lily stood at the center of the marble floor, alone but not small. Her presence pulled attention away from the altar, away from the white roses, away from the carefully designed spectacle meant to dominate tomorrow's business pages. Now, every eye was on the woman he had once called temporary. Natalia descended one step from the altar platform. "This is inappropriate," she said, voice controlled but sharp. "Security." "Don't," Gray snapped, louder than he intended. That single word carried across the hall. Guests stiffened. This was no longer a private dispute. This was exposure. Lily lifted the microphone closer to her lips. "You wanted a performance," she said calmly. "You're going to get one." Her gaze swept across the crowd. Board members, investors, media, witnesses. Gray understood something in that instant. She hadn't come to sing. Lily turned slightly, no longer speaking only to Gray. She addressed the entire room. "You all see a billionaire at the altar," she said. "You see success, influence, power." Her eyes returned to him. But this didn't start tonight. A pause. Years ago, before the headlines and the private jets, there was a small office in Midtown. Cracked windows, overdue rent, a man terrified of being ordinary. A murmur moved through the guests. I stood beside him when no one else would, she continued. When investors walked away, when banks said no, when he doubted himself at 2 a.m, Gray's jaw tightened. I married him before the empire, she said. Before the image mattered more than loyalty. The air shifted, and on our 5th anniversary, while I was carrying his child, her voice dipped, steady but heavy. He told me I was temporary. A visible reaction swept the front rows. I lost that baby alone, she added quietly. While he celebrated becoming untouchable, Natalia's composure cracked for the first time. Lily drew a slow breath. And tonight, he invited me here to entertain his new beginning. She rested her hand over her stomach again. I came to close an old chapter. Silence deepened. Lily lowered the microphone slightly. If you think money gives someone the right to erase the people who built them, she said, scanning the room, stay silent. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. But if you believe respect matters more than wealth, she continued, then remember this moment. She looked directly at Gray. Because power fades, character doesn't. Her voice softened, but it carried. And every woman who has ever been told she was temporary, you are not. The statement hung in the air like a verdict. Now, to you watching this story unfold, if you believe respect matters more than wealth, like this video, if you would have walked away instead of begging, comment dignity. And if you want more stories where truth confronts power, subscribe to Mr. Victor's Storytime, because this night is far from over. Years before the wedding humiliation, Gray Bradford was not a headline. He was a man in a cramped Midtown Manhattan office, with peeling paint near the radiator and a desk he bought second-hand from a closing startup. His company had a name no one remembered yet. A tech platform he claimed would redefine digital infrastructure. Investors did not agree. He pitched in glass towers overlooking Bryant Park. He pitched in cramped conference rooms near Wall Street. He pitched in coffee shops in Soho when he couldn't afford office space. He spoke with conviction, charts, market forecasts, expansion models. But the responses followed a pattern. It's too early. Come back with traction. You don't have the network. You don't look like a founder we can scale. That last one stayed with him. He would return to his office, loosen his tie, and replay those meetings in his head. Not the financial critiques. The tone. The way older executives leaned back in their chairs as if measuring him. The way they asked about his background before his product. Gray hated being measured. He hated appearing small. At night, he stood at the window overlooking traffic and studied the skyline. One World Trade Center illuminated the dark horizon. Luxury penthouses glowed above Fifth Avenue. He did not want comfort. He wanted dominance. Power meant never hearing no again. He began adjusting more than his business model. He adjusted himself. Tailored suits instead of department store jackets. Speech coaching to sharpen his cadence. He practiced eye contact in the mirror. He studied powerful men the way athletes study competitors. How they walked. How long they paused before answering questions. How they controlled rooms without raising their voices. Rejection didn't humble him, it fueled him. When banks declined his loan applications, he framed it as motivation. When an investor laughed during one presentation, Gray didn't flinch outwardly. But that night, he doubled his projections and rewrote his pitch until 3 a.m. Failure was not an option. Not because he loved innovation, because he feared invisibility. Success, to Gray, was not about creating something meaningful. It was about never being dismissed again. He kept a list in his drawer, names of those who rejected him. Not out of anger, out of memory. One day, he would make them request meetings with him, and when that day came, he would decide who was worthy. The obsession grew quietly. He measured his worth by potential valuation. He measured relationships by strategic value. He measured time by productivity. Softness had no place in his blueprint. In those early days, he told himself he was building freedom, but what he was building was armor. And armor, once worn too long, becomes identity. While Gray chased valuation charts downtown, Lily moved through a different world 20 blocks north. The Upper East Side townhouse where she worked stood behind iron gates and manicured hedges. Inside, polished floors reflected chandeliers. Family portraits lined the staircase walls. Wealth lived there quietly. Lily did not belong to it. She managed it. She was a live-in nanny for a finance executive and his art curator wife. 2 children, under 10. Private school schedules, piano lessons, therapy appointments, structured routines. She handled everything with precision. Morning breakfasts before sunrise, homework supervision, evening baths, bedtime stories. The parents trusted her because she was consistent, calm, reliable. But what they didn't fully see was her discipline. Lily had learned early that stability does not come from comfort. It comes from control. She grew up moving between apartments in Brooklyn, promises from adults that rarely lasted, affection that often came with conditions. By the time she turned 18, she had decided one thing clearly: no one would ever define her survival again. She saved aggressively. She tracked expenses in a small black notebook. She enrolled in evening vocal training classes twice a week in Harlem, paying cash. Music was hers, not for applause, for ownership. Her voice carried depth beyond her years. When she sang, she did not perform. She released. But outside of music, she kept her emotions guarded. She watched people carefully before trusting them. At charity events hosted by her employers, she blended into the background while observing everything. The way wealthy men evaluated rooms, the way wives measured one another with subtle glances. Power dynamics fascinated her, not because she wanted to enter that world, because she understood it. She knew ambition when she saw it. She knew insecurity disguised as confidence. And she knew men who chased validation through status. When mutual acquaintances introduced her to Gray Bradford at a rooftop gathering near Tribeca, she recognized the look in his eyes immediately. Hungry. Not for love. For elevation. He wore confidence like a suit tailored a size too tight. He asked what she did. "I work," she replied simply. He pressed further. "That's not what I meant." She studied him for a moment before answering. "I mean exactly what I say." She noticed how his jaw flexed. He wasn't used to women who didn't lean forward when he spoke. That intrigued him. But Lily did not melt under ambition. She had seen men dream loudly before. What interested her wasn't his projections. It was whether he could handle a woman who didn't need saving. And at that first meeting, she already sensed something important. Gray Bradford did not want a partner. He wanted admiration. She decided to observe him, not surrender to him. Their first real conversation happened 3 nights later. Gray invited her to a small networking dinner in Chelsea. He framed it as casual, but the guest list included 2 junior investors and a startup founder he hoped to impress. Lily almost declined. Then she accepted. Not for him. For observation. The restaurant was dim, expensive beyond Gray's comfort level. He had checked the prices twice before confirming the reservation. Throughout dinner, he dominated discussion. Market expansion, digital ecosystems, disruption strategies. He spoke with urgency, hands moving sharply to emphasize projections. The others nodded politely. Lily listened quietly. When one investor excused himself to take a call, Gray leaned toward her. "You've barely said anything. You haven't asked anything worth answering," she replied. He stared at her, not offended, challenged. "You think you understand what I'm building?" he asked. "I think you're building something to prove you matter." The statement landed cleanly. His eyes narrowed slightly. "And what's wrong with that?" "Nothing," she said, "unless the proving never ends." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled slowly. "You're different." She tilted her head. "From what?" "From women who see potential and immediately attach themselves to it. And you assume that's why women talk to you." The investor returned before he could respond, but Gray didn't drop it. After dinner, he insisted on walking her to the subway entrance. The October air carried a sharp chill. "I don't date casually," he said abruptly. That wasn't a date. He stepped closer, not touching, just closing distance. "I'm going to build something massive," he said. "And when I do, the woman beside me will never worry about anything again." Lily folded her arms. "You talk like security is currency." "It is for people who are afraid," she said evenly. He studied her face. "You're not impressed?" "No." "You don't believe in ambition?" "I believe in it," she answered. "I just don't worship it." There it was again, that resistance. Most people leaned into his drive. She pushed back. Instead of softening his approach, he intensified it. Over the next few weeks, he sent car services to pick her up, reserved tables he couldn't comfortably afford, introduced her to spaces he wanted to conquer. He showed her penthouses under construction and said, "One day." He walked her past corporate towers and said, "Soon." He didn't ask about her fears. He presented his vision. And in that vision she stood beside him like an accessory to triumph. But Lily did not shrink into that role. When he talked about expansion, she asked about ethics. When he discussed leverage, she asked about loyalty. The tension between them sharpened. It wasn't softness drawing them closer. It was friction, and neither of them stepped away. The night it shifted was quiet. No investors, no curated audience, no strategic dinner. Gray had worked late in his office near Madison Avenue. Lily arrived after finishing an evening vocal session in Harlem. She didn't dress for him. Simple black coat, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. He offered her a drink. She declined and sat on the edge of his desk instead, glancing around the room. Stacks of contracts, a whiteboard covered in projected growth numbers, a list of names written in thick marker. "Do you ever rest?" she asked. "Rest is for people who've already won, and you think you're losing?" He exhaled slowly. For the first time, there was no audience to impress. "I can't afford to be average," he said. "That's not an answer." He looked at her differently then, less guarded. "My father worked his whole life and died unknown," he said. "No legacy, no recognition, just bills. And that scares you." "Yes." The honesty lingered between them. Lily stepped off the desk and moved closer. "You don't build a legacy by outrunning fear," she said softly. "You build it by choosing who you become." He searched her face, as if trying to measure whether she meant it. "You don't need me," he said suddenly. She didn't hesitate. "No." Most men would have pulled back at that. Gray stepped closer instead. "And that doesn't threaten me," he said. "That's because you don't understand it yet." His hand rose slowly, almost cautious, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture wasn't forceful. It wasn't rushed. It was deliberate. "You challenge me," he said. "Good." Their eyes locked. The kiss wasn't wild. It was charged. His hand settled at her waist, firm but not demanding. She didn't melt into him. She met him halfway, equal pressure, equal intention. There was hunger, yes, but there was also calculation. Gray kissed like a man claiming ground. Lily kissed like a woman who refused to be claimed. When they pulled back, the air felt altered. "This won't be simple," she said quietly. "I don't want simple. You want control. I want certainty. Those aren't the same." He held her gaze, unwilling to concede. She touched his chest lightly, not possessive, not dependent. "I will stand beside you," she said, "not behind you." At that moment, he believed he understood. He believed love could exist within his blueprint. He did not yet realize that his need to dominate rooms would one day reach into his marriage. And Lily, from the very beginning, made one thing clear without ever saying it outright: she would never shrink to protect his ego. Gray did not court Lily gently. He pursued her with momentum. Within weeks, he rearranged his schedule to match hers. If she had a free hour between childcare shifts, he filled it. If she mentioned a favorite cafe in Harlem, he reserved the private room upstairs. If she had rehearsal, he waited outside afterward, leaning against his car like patience was a strategy. He treated love like expansion, structured, intentional, forward-moving. "Come with me to San Francisco next month," he said one evening while reviewing projections on his tablet. "There's a tech summit. I want you there." "As what?" she asked. "My partner." She held his gaze. "In business? In life?" The words were smooth, convincing. He spoke often about the future. Penthouse views, international conferences, global acquisitions. He painted a life without limits. "You won't have to work for anyone again," he told her once as they walked along the Brooklyn Bridge at dusk. "I'll build something that carries us both." Lily stopped walking. "I don't want to be carried," she said calmly. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you did." He sighed, adjusting. "I want to build something we control. That's different." He was learning her language slowly, but even in romance, ambition led. He upgraded restaurants, upgraded hotels, upgraded promises. He bought her a necklace after closing a minor funding round. She accepted it, then placed it back in his hand. "Don't celebrate what isn't stable yet." He stared at her. "You don't believe in me?" "I believe in effort," she replied. "Belief comes after consistency." That answer didn't discourage him. It intensified him. For the first time, he wanted to prove something to a woman, not just investors. Yet Lily never lost herself in his vision. She continued working, continued singing, continued saving her own money. When he suggested she move into a larger apartment he had just leased, she paused. "Are you asking because you want me there," she said, "or because it fits your image?" He stepped closer. "I want you with me. Then say that first next time." He was drawn to her restraint. She didn't flatter him. She didn't orbit him. She didn't soften her opinions to keep peace. And that made him want her more. But beneath her caution, hope existed. Hope that the driven man in front of her could grow into a grounded one. Hope that ambition would not overpower intimacy. Hope that when success came, it wouldn't change how he looked at her. She told herself something quietly during those months. "If he chooses me before the empire, he will value me after it." Neither of them understood how fragile that assumption was. They married before the headlines. No magazine spreads, no televised vows, no strategic guest list. Just a small ceremony in a historic courthouse near City Hall. 2 close friends. A modest bouquet. Gray in a navy suit he'd worn to investor meetings. Lily in a simple ivory dress she paid for herself. There was no spectacle, only certainty. When the officiant asked if he would stand beside her in loyalty and partnership, Gray answered without hesitation, "Yes." When Lily repeated her vows, her voice held steady strength. She did not promise obedience. She promised presence. Afterward, they walked through Lower Manhattan hand in hand, unnoticed by the world Gray was determined to conquer. For a brief season, they were aligned. They moved into a modern apartment near Madison Square Park. It wasn't extravagant, but it symbolized momentum. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, shared space. They built routines, morning coffee together before he left for meetings, late-night dinners reheated after he returned from networking events, weekends spent reviewing his pitch decks side by side. Lily offered insight he hadn't considered. "Don't oversell potential," she told him once. "Let the product speak." He adjusted his presentation because of her. When funding rounds stalled, she stayed up with him. When an investor withdrew unexpectedly, she didn't panic. "You're building something long-term," she said. "Short-term rejection doesn't define that." He leaned on her more than he admitted. Their physical connection deepened too. Not rushed, not careless. There was intensity in it, but also intention. He learned the rhythm of her breath. She learned the weight of his silence. Some nights he would trace patterns along her shoulder while talking about expansion into new markets. Other nights, he would admit fears he never voiced publicly. "What if I fail completely?" he asked once, lying beside her in the dim glow of city lights. "Then we rebuild," she replied. "We?" "Yes, we." In those early years, he saw her as equal, not an accessory, not an extension. a partner, and Lily believed it. She saw ambition tempered by vulnerability. She saw effort. She saw a man trying to rise without losing himself. What neither of them recognized was this: their marriage was built before pressure, before wealth, before ego had room to expand, and sometimes love that forms in struggle must survive success. Not every bond does. Success had not arrived yet, but momentum had. Gray's company began gaining traction. Small contracts, pilot programs, early validation. Nothing massive, but enough to suggest the future he kept describing might materialize. Those were the nights he struggled most. After public confidence all day, doubt returned in private. He would sit at the edge of their bed, laptop closed, shoulders tense. "I feel like I'm racing something," he admitted one night. "Racing what?" Lily asked. "Time, expectations. Every person who ever doubted me." She moved closer, brushing her fingers lightly along his back. "You don't have to defeat ghosts," she said. "I can't be forgettable," he replied quietly. There it was again. Not fear of poverty, fear of irrelevance. He lay back beside her, staring at the ceiling. "I don't want to end up as a footnote," he said. "You won't," she answered. "But not because of valuation." He turned toward her. "Then why?" "Because of who you choose to become." Their closeness deepened in those conversations. Their intimacy wasn't built on spectacle. It grew from vulnerability. He would pull her into him, firm but seeking reassurance. She responded with steadiness, never submission. Their connection carried heat, but it was grounded in presence. When he felt overwhelmed by investor pressure, she anchored him. When he doubted his strategy, she offered clarity. "You don't need to impress everyone," she told him once, resting her forehead against his. "You need to build something real." He believed her, and in those quiet hours, he softened. He admitted childhood insecurities, compared himself to founders already featured in business journals, feared being overtaken by competitors. Lily listened without judgment. She didn't compete with his ambition. She balanced it. She continued singing at small venues twice a month. He attended when he could, watching from the back of dimly lit rooms as her voice commanded attention. He admired her composure, her independence. He told friends, "She's different. She doesn't need me." At the time, he meant it with pride. He didn't yet understand how threatening that fact would feel once he gained real power. For now, though, their roles were clear. He built the company. She stabilized the man. And in that balance, they felt strong. The turning point arrived on a Tuesday morning. A venture capital firm in Palo Alto wired the first major investment into Gray's company account. 7 figures. Real backing. Real validation. Gray stared at the confirmation email for a full minute before exhaling. He called Lily immediately. "We did it," he said. She smiled when she heard the tremor in his voice. "I'm proud of you." But something else entered the room with that money. Attention. Board meetings moved from rented spaces to executive conference rooms overlooking the Hudson. His calendar filled weeks in advance. Media outlets requested interviews. Invitations to private networking events multiplied. Gray upgraded his suits again, upgraded his watch, upgraded his circle. He began speaking differently. Less about building, more about scaling. Less about partnership, more about positioning. At dinners, he corrected Lily mid-sentence when she spoke casually about company plans. "We're not thinking small anymore," he said once, a sharp edge in his tone. She noticed. "You used to say 'we' differently," she replied quietly later that night. "What do you mean?" It sounded shared. Now it sounds owned. He dismissed it with a light laugh. "You're reading too much into it." But she wasn't. Success amplified him. Investors praised his decisiveness. Media admired his confidence. Articles referred to him as visionary. He began absorbing those descriptions. When she attended events by his side, she felt subtle shifts. Introductions changed. "This is my wife, Lily," he would say. Before, his hand rested naturally at her waist. Now it positioned her. Like placement mattered. During one fundraiser, a board member asked her, "What role do you play in the company?" Before she could answer, Gray responded, "She supports me." The phrasing was small, but it lingered. That night, Lily stood at their apartment window alone, while Gray remained on the phone in the living room, negotiating terms with a potential partner in Chicago. She wasn't angry. She was observing. Ambition had always been part of him. Now it was becoming the center. When he finally came to bed, energized from closing another deal, he wrapped an arm around her. "We're going to be unstoppable," he said. She looked at him carefully. Unstoppable? At what cost? He didn't answer, because for the first time, he hadn't considered one. The invitations changed. They no longer came from startup mixers or small investor circles. They came embossed in gold lettering, black tie galas, private yacht fundraisers, closed-door executive retreats in Aspen. Gray thrived in those rooms. He spoke with confidence sharpened by recent success. He laughed louder, held eye contact longer, moved through conversations like a man who expected space to open for him. And it did. Lily attended beside him at first. She wore understated gowns, minimal jewelry, her posture calm, her gaze observant. She listened as venture capitalists baited acquisitions and politicians discussed regulation. She noticed how quickly people shifted tone around money, how praise attached itself to influence, how proximity became currency. At one gala overlooking Central Park, she stood beside Gray while he spoke with a private equity partner. The man glanced at her and asked, "And what do you do?" Before she could respond, Gray answered smoothly, "She keeps me grounded." The comment drew polite laughter, but Lily felt it. He had reduced her. Later that evening, as they rode home in a hired car, she faced him. "You didn't let me speak." It wasn't that kind of conversation. What kind? Strategic. She held his gaze. "I'm not decoration. I didn't say you were. You didn't have to." He leaned back, irritation flickering across his face. "These rooms operate differently," he said. "There's positioning involved. And I don't fit the position?" "That's not what I mean." But it was. As weeks passed, Gray attended more events alone. "It'll be late," he would say. "No point dragging you along." She knew that wasn't about convenience. It was about curation. At home, she waited less. She filled her evenings with vocal rehearsals again. Private sessions, small performances. Her voice grew stronger, richer, shaped by unspoken emotion. When Gray returned late from a rooftop gathering in Tribeca one night, energized from closing another partnership, he found her reviewing sheet music at the dining table. "You missed a good night," he said. "I had one," she replied calmly. He paused. Their schedules were beginning to run parallel instead of intertwined. And for the first time, Lily felt something shift. Not jealousy, distance. Gray was building an empire, but in the process, he was slowly repositioning his wife outside of it. Natalia re-entered their lives at a charity auction in Midtown. Lily saw her before Gray did. Tall, polished, effortless in a silver gown that caught every flash of light. Her smile carried precision, not warmth. College memories surfaced immediately. Shared dorm rooms, late-night conversations, dreams whispered without filters. They had once been close, until life divided them. Natalia had always moved strategically. Even in college, she aligned herself with influence, student government, networking circles, men with ambition. Now she stood beside a tech investor Gray had been pursuing for months. When Gray turned and saw her, surprise flickered across his face. "Natalia?" "Gray Bradford," she replied smoothly. "I hear you're making waves." The investor smiled between them. "You two know each other?" "Old friends," Natalia said. Lily stepped forward. "Roommates," she clarified. Natalia's eyes scanned her briefly. Assessment, not affection. "It's been years," Natalia said, though her tone suggested she had followed more than she admitted. Gray straightened slightly. "You're in venture now." "Advisory," she corrected. "Selective partnerships." She spoke in concise phrases. "Confident. controlled, and she knew exactly when to laugh at Gray's comments. Over the next few weeks, her presence became consistent. Board events, private dinners, industry panels. Each time, she positioned herself near Gray with subtle ease. If he needed an introduction, she offered one. If he mentioned expansion plans, she referenced a contact. If he doubted a negotiation strategy, she praised his instincts. She never contradicted him publicly. Lily noticed the contrast. Where she had once questioned him, Natalia affirmed him. Where Lily challenged projections, Natalia reinforced them. One evening, after a networking dinner in Soho, Gray mentioned casually, "Natalia's firm might advise on our next acquisition." Lily kept her tone neutral. "She's good at aligning herself with rising power." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means she sees opportunity." He frowned. "You think she has an agenda?" "I think everyone does." Gray brushed it off. But he began consulting Natalia more frequently. Conference calls that stretched past midnight. Coffee meetings without Lily present. Text messages that lingered unanswered on his screen when Lily walked into the room. Natalia never overstepped openly. She didn't need to. She understood proximity, and she understood Gray's growing appetite for validation. The more success he tasted, the more he gravitated toward those who reflected it back to him. Lily had once been his grounding force. Natalia became his mirror. The shift was gradual, not loud enough to name at first. Gray began spending more time at the office, even on evenings when no urgent deadlines existed. Strategy sessions stretched longer. Advisory meetings became frequent. Natalia's name surfaced in conversation almost daily. "She thinks we should accelerate expansion into Miami," he said one night while scanning emails. "And what do you think?" Lily asked. "I think she understands scale." The phrasing lingered. Lily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched him. He no longer asked her opinion before major decisions. He informed her afterward. Board dinners replaced shared meals at home. When he did return early, he seemed distracted, scrolling through messages mid-conversation. One evening, as they sat across from each other at their kitchen island, Lily asked directly, "Are you still building with me or around me?" He looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means I feel like I'm observing your life instead of living in it." "That's dramatic." "No," she said calmly. "It's honest." He stood, pacing slightly. "You knew what you married. I'm building something massive. It demands focus." "I didn't marry a company," she replied. "I married a man." His expression hardened. "Don't make this about jealousy." "It's not." But something had changed. Natalia's influence extended beyond business advice. She praised Gray publicly, laughed easily at his comments, supported his decisions without hesitation. He felt understood in those rooms, affirmed. With Lily, he felt examined. At a private rooftop event in Tribeca, Gray introduced Natalia to a media executive as someone who sees the bigger picture. Lily overheard it. Later that night, in the car home, silence stretched between them. "You look at her differently," Lily said finally. "That's ridiculous." "It's not about attraction," she clarified. "It's about ego." He didn't answer, because he couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt when Natalia reinforced his dominance in a room. He began guarding his phone. He began dismissing Lily's concerns as overthinking. He began treating her strength as resistance. And in that space, distance settled, not explosive, not confrontational, but steady. The triangle had formed, one woman grounding him, one woman elevating his image. Gray believed he could manage both. He underestimated how fragile trust becomes when attention shifts. It wasn't a single moment, it was accumulation. Gray stopped asking Lily to attend major functions. At first, he framed it as convenience. "You have rehearsal," he said. "You'll be bored. It's mostly investors." Eventually, he stopped explaining. She would see photos online the next morning. Gray standing beside Natalia at podiums. Natalia seated 2 chairs away during advisory panels. Natalia laughing near him at charity galas. The optics were clean, professional. but intimate in a way that didn't require touch. At home, the air shifted. Gray no longer reached for her first when he came to bed. He answered emails until sleep overtook him. When she tried to initiate conversation about their distance, he reframed it as timing. "This is a critical growth phase," he said. "Don't complicate it." "Marriage isn't a complication," she replied. He rubbed his temples. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." She studied him quietly. Harder for who? One Saturday afternoon, she arrived unannounced at his office to surprise him with lunch. The receptionist hesitated before letting her through. Gray was inside the glass conference room. Natalia sat across from him. Not inappropriate, not physical, but close. Their laptops open, their bodies angled toward each other in full engagement. They were reviewing financial projections, but their comfort was evident. Gray looked up and saw Lily through the glass. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Interruption. He stepped outside to meet her. "You could have called first," he said. "I didn't think I needed clearance." "It's not that." "Then what is it?" He exhaled. "These meetings are sensitive." "So am I." The words landed heavier than she intended. He glanced back at the room. Natalia avoided eye contact, focused on the screen as though nothing had shifted. Lily handed him the lunch bag. "I won't interrupt," she said calmly. But something inside her had settled. Not panic, recognition. She had once been the person he confided in after investor meetings. Now she was outside the glass. That night, she stood alone in their apartment, looking at the skyline he once promised would belong to them. She didn't cry. She calculated. If she had to compete for her own husband's attention, she had already lost something more important. And the crack in their marriage, once subtle, was now visible. Lily chose navy. Not because it was bold, because it was steady. The dress fit her perfectly, simple but elegant, resting softly against a body carrying a secret she had protected for 3 weeks. She had confirmed it quietly. A doctor's visit in the late afternoon. A calm voice explaining early stages. A printed ultrasound image folded carefully into her purse. She walked home slowly that evening, one hand resting lightly over her stomach. Hope felt different this time. Not dramatic. Grounded. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of building from nothing. 5 years of believing they were aligned, even when tension surfaced. She decided their anniversary would be the right moment. Not at a public event, not during an argument. At home. Private. Intentional. She prepared dinner herself, dismissing the idea of ordering in. He used to love when she cooked. She wanted to remind him of that version of them. Candles lined the dining table. Soft jazz played through the speakers. The apartment lights dimmed to warmth instead of brightness. She placed the ultrasound image inside a small envelope and set it beside his wine glass. Her heart beat faster than usual. This child could reset everything. A new chapter. A shared legacy built from love, not positioning. She imagined his reaction. Surprise first, then pride. Then perhaps that softness she had missed recently. She checked the time. He was late, not unusual. She adjusted the table setting and waited. 30 minutes passed, then 40. Her phone remained silent. When the door finally unlocked, she straightened instinctively. Gray entered without his usual energy. No quick kiss, no appreciative glance at the candles. He removed his jacket slowly. Expression unreadable. "You're late," she said gently. Board meeting ran over. He didn't ask about dinner. He didn't notice the music. He didn't notice the envelope. She watched him closely. Something was off. He poured himself a drink without sitting down. "Can we talk?" he asked. The tone was unfamiliar, formal, distant. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. "We are talking," she replied carefully. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. And in that moment, Lily felt it. Whatever he was about to say would not match the hope she had prepared. Gray did not sit. He remained standing near the head of the table, drink in hand, as if creating distance before speaking. Lily stayed seated, waiting. The candles flickered between them. "I've been thinking for a while," he began. Her stomach tightened. "About what?" she asked. "About us." The word felt heavy in the air. He exhaled slowly, rehearsed composure, settling over his features. "This isn't working anymore." Silence followed. She studied his face, searching for hesitation. There was none. "What exactly isn't working?" she asked. "Our alignment," he said. "The direction my life is moving in. It doesn't match this marriage." She felt the ground shift beneath the calm she had prepared. "You mean it doesn't match me?" He didn't deny it. "I need a partner who understands scale," he continued. "The expectations now are different." Her voice remained steady. "I've stood beside you through every stage, and I appreciate that," he said quickly. "But the reality is, I've outgrown this." The words landed clean, precise, cruel in their clarity. She glanced at the table, at the dinner she prepared, at the envelope beside his glass. "You've outgrown your wife?" she asked. "It's not personal." Her lips parted slightly. "Divorce is always personal." He set his glass down. "I want a divorce, Lily." There it was. No argument, no raised voices. Just a decision delivered like a business proposal. Her heartbeat slowed in a way that felt unnatural. "And when were you going to discuss this with me?" she asked. "I'm discussing it now." "You're informing me." He ran a hand through his hair, impatience surfacing. "This doesn't have to be messy." The phrasing struck her harder than the statement itself. Messy. As if 5 years could be categorized as inconvenience. "And why now?" she asked quietly. He hesitated for half a second. "That matters?" "Yes." He looked away. "There are expectations at my level now," he said. "Image. Stability. Legacy." Her breath caught slightly at that last word. Legacy. If only he knew. Lily stood slowly. The chair scraped softly against the floor. "Say it clearly," she said. "Don't hide behind phrases." Gray's jaw tightened. "You don't fit the future I'm building." "And what does that future require?" she asked. He met her eyes. Refinement. Strategic alignment. Someone who understands public positioning. Her voice sharpened slightly. "I understand loyalty. That's not the same thing." "Apparently not." He stepped closer to the table, hands resting against the polished surface. "The people I'm negotiating with now expect a certain presentation, a certain image. My wife reflects on me." "I've always reflected you," she replied. "Yes," he said, and then paused. "But not in the way I need anymore." The sentence cut deeper than he anticipated. She held her composure. "You married me before you had leverage," she said. "Before the coverage. Before the board seats. And I'm grateful. But now I'm inconvenient. That's not fair." "Then what is?" He exhaled sharply, losing patience. "You were never meant to be permanent." The words hung between them. Heavy. Irreversible. Lily did not flinch. But something inside her shifted. "Explain that," she said evenly. "When we met, I needed stability," he replied. "You needed security. It worked." Her eyes hardened. "You think I married you for money?" "I think we both benefited." The accusation was clean. "Clinical," he continued, voice controlled. "You don't come from the world I operate in now. These rooms require polish, influence, legacy families, strategic alliances. So this is about status. It's about growth." "No," she corrected. "It's about ego." His expression closed. "You're emotional. And you're arrogant." The silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was final. Lily looked at him for a long moment. 5 years of memories stood between them. Small apartments, shared dreams, late-night fears, early wins, all reduced to positioning. She glanced at the envelope beside his glass. Her fingers brushed it lightly. He didn't notice. "Is there someone else?" she asked calmly. Gray hesitated. That hesitation was enough. "I won't insult you by lying," he said. The confirmation did not shatter her. It clarified. She picked up the envelope. For a second, she considered handing it to him, telling him, letting the truth collide with his certainty. But she saw his posture, rigid, defensive, already detached. He wasn't searching for connection. He was closing a contract. So she made a decision of her own. She placed the envelope back into her purse. "You won't have to worry about messiness," she said. He looked confused. "I won't beg," she continued. "And I won't compete. This doesn't have to be hostile. It isn't." She walked toward the bedroom without raising her voice. He followed halfway down the hallway. "Where are you going?" "To pack. Tonight?" "Yes." "You're overreacting." She turned slowly. "No," she said. "I'm responding." She packed methodically. Clothes first, personal documents, her vocal notebooks, photographs she chose to keep, not everything, only what belonged to her identity. When she returned to the living room with a single suitcase, Gray stood where she had left him. "You're making this dramatic," he said. "I'm making it clean." She paused at the door. "You once said you didn't want to be forgettable," she added quietly. "Be careful what you sacrifice to avoid that." He didn't answer, because he believed success would justify everything. She stepped into the hallway. The door closed without a slam. No screaming, no pleading, no revelation about the child she carried. Just silence, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to beg for permanence. The apartment in Queens was nothing like the glass-walled home she left behind. Second floor, narrow hallway, radiator that hissed at night, a single window facing another brick building. It was quiet, honest. Lily set her suitcase down and stood in the center of the small living room. For the first time since the divorce conversation, her composure slipped, not into chaos, into stillness. She removed the folded ultrasound image from her purse and placed it gently on the kitchen counter. 6 weeks, a small, grainy shape. Proof of something Gray had dismissed before knowing it existed. She sat at the edge of the couch and let her palm rest over her stomach. "You're mine," she whispered softly. "Not his, not shared. Mine." She considered calling him, telling him everything, letting the knowledge interrupt whatever polished version of freedom he believed he had gained. But she replayed his words. "You were never meant to be permanent." That sentence erased the option. This child would not be leverage. This child would not be proof. This child would be protected. She scheduled her doctor's appointments alone, took the subway to each visit, sat among strangers flipping through outdated magazines, while other couples held hands nearby. When the nurse asked for the father's information, Lily paused, then left the line blank. At night, she sang softly to herself while preparing simple meals, not stage performances, just melodies floating through a room too small for regret. She tracked her expenses carefully, calculated how many months of savings she had, adjusted her rehearsal schedule to accommodate prenatal checkups. Her body changed quietly. Fatigue settled in. Nausea came in waves. She endured it without complaint. No dramatic announcements, no celebration posts, just survival. But beneath the exhaustion was something steady, resolve. Gray had measured legacy by public perception. Lily measured it by responsibility, and in that small apartment, alone but grounded, she made a promise. Her child would never feel temporary. The pain began on a Thursday morning. Sharp, unexpected. Lily had just returned from a rehearsal downtown when the cramp tightened low in her abdomen. She paused in the hallway of her apartment, steadying herself against the wall. "It's normal," she whispered. Early pregnancy discomfort. She had read about it. But this felt different. By evening, the pain deepened. Persistent, heavy. She called her doctor's office. The nurse told her to monitor it and come in if it worsened. It did. Around midnight, she found herself in the back seat of a rideshare car heading toward a hospital in Long Island City, gripping the door handle as each wave of pain passed through her. The waiting room was too bright, too ordinary. A television mounted in the corner played a late-night sitcom while 2 other patients sat scrolling through their phones. Lily pressed both hands over her stomach. "Stay," she whispered under her breath. When the nurse finally called her name, her voice remained steady. Inside the examination room, the doctor moved efficiently. Ultrasound gel, quiet machine hum, focused eyes scanning the screen. Lily searched the monitor, searching for the small flicker she had seen before. The room felt longer than it was. The doctor cleared her throat gently. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words. Clinical. Final. The rest blurred. Medical explanations. Hormonal shifts. Statistics about how common it is. Lily nodded through all of it. Common did not mean small. She signed discharge papers alone, walked back into the cold night air alone. The city moved as usual. Taxis passed. People laughed outside bars. A delivery truck rumbled down the street. Nothing had stopped, except something inside her. Back in her apartment, she sat on the floor instead of the couch. Her body felt hollow, not empty. Hollow. She held the ultrasound photo in her hands and stared at it until her vision blurred. There were no tears at first, just shock. Then, slowly, grief broke through. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet tears that fell without resistance. "I tried," she whispered. She did not call Gray. She did not send a message. He had chosen absence before the loss occurred. He did not earn proximity to it afterward. That night, Lily understood something painful and clarifying. Some men want legacy. Few understand the weight of carrying it. While Lily recovered in private, Gray expanded in public. Within months of the divorce, his company secured a major acquisition deal in Chicago. Financial media outlets featured his face across business websites. Bradford Tech doubles valuation in record quarter. Gray Bradford, the future of digital infrastructure. His interviews carried new polish, tailored suits, controlled tone, strategic pauses before answering questions about growth forecasts. When asked about his personal life, he kept responses brief. "I'm focused on expansion." Photographs from industry events circulated online. Gray shaking hands with senators. Gray seated beside venture capital leaders. Gray attending fundraisers with Natalia visible near his side. The narrative was clean. Ambitious founder. Smart alliances. Forward momentum. No mention of a wife who had left quietly. No trace of the anniversary dinner. Success shielded him. Board seats multiplied. Private equity partnerships formed. Invitations to speak at Stanford and MIT arrived. He moved into a penthouse overlooking the Hudson. Glass walls. Private elevator. Controlled lighting. Everything reflected upward motion. When reporters asked about legacy, he answered confidently, "We're building something that will outlast trends." He meant the company. He did not know what had already been lost. Natalia appeared more frequently beside him now. Advisory meetings turned into shared travel, conferences in Miami, closed-door negotiations in Boston. She positioned herself carefully, never overreaching, always aligned. In photographs, they stood close enough to imply cohesion, not scandal. Public perception stabilized, investors approved, and Gray believed the transition had been seamless. He measured progress in stock projections and capital growth. He did not measure silence. He did not see the small apartment in Queens. He did not hear the absence of a heartbeat that once carried his name. From the outside, his rise looked inevitable. From the inside, he had begun replacing substance with optics. And no headline captured that. Grief did not erase Lily. It sharpened her. After the hospital visit, she gave herself 3 days. 3 days to rest. 3 days to feel everything. 3 days without pretending strength meant silence. On the 4th morning, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and studied her reflection. Her eyes were swollen, her shoulders slightly slumped, but she was still there. And that mattered. She folded the ultrasound photo carefully and placed it inside a journal instead of throwing it away. Loss did not erase love. It transformed it. She returned to vocal training the following week. Her instructor noticed the difference immediately. "You're singing from somewhere deeper," he said after one rehearsal. "I don't have a choice," she replied. Her voice carried new weight, controlled pain, measured intensity. She began performing again in small Manhattan lounges under the name Phoenix. Not for recognition, for reclamation. Each stage felt like a declaration. I am still here. She expanded her saving strategy, took on additional private music sessions, accepted freelance childcare work on weekends to stabilize income. Discipline replaced despair. Late at night, when memories tried to pull her backward, she redirected the energy, not toward revenge, toward growth. She enrolled in a short investment literacy course at a community college, learned about equity structures, asset diversification, offshore holdings. If she was ever going to stand in rooms like the ones Gray now occupied, she would do it informed, not dependent. She did not speak his name, not to friends, not in rehearsal spaces. She refused to let bitterness shape her next chapter. But she carried one question quietly. If you build someone from the ground up and they discard you at the peak, do you fight for them? Or do you rebuild yourself stronger? Now I want to ask you, watching this story unfold, would you have told him about the pregnancy before leaving? Or would you have walked away in silence like she did? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe strength sometimes means leaving without explanation, make sure you like this video. Because Lily's rebuilding phase is about to change everything. The first night she performed under the name Phoenix, only 30 people filled the lounge in Lower Manhattan. Dim lighting, small stage, a piano that had seen better years, no press, no investors, just an audience that wanted to feel something real. Lily stood behind the microphone in a deep burgundy dress, simple but commanding. Her hair fell naturally over her shoulders. No elaborate introduction, no dramatic entrance. The pianist nodded once. She began. Her voice didn't rush to impress. It unfolded, controlled, grounded, mature. Each note carried restraint shaped by experience. Each lyric felt earned, not performed. Conversations at the bar quieted. Glasses paused mid-air. By the second verse, the room was hers. She sang about love without begging, about departure without collapse, about standing alone without shrinking. No names mentioned, no public accusations, just truth layered into melody. When she finished, the applause wasn't explosive. It was steady, respectful. A jazz blogger in the audience wrote about her the next morning. Phoenix delivers vulnerability without fragility, a voice shaped by survival. More invitations followed. A lounge in Harlem, an intimate club in Tribeca, a private corporate event in Midtown. She accepted selectively. Her stage presence evolved quickly. She didn't perform like someone seeking approval. She performed like someone reclaiming space. Between sets, she listened more than she spoke. She studied the rooms she stood in, the executives who attended quietly, the investors who valued authenticity when it wasn't threatening. Some recognized her face faintly, but none connected her to Gray publicly. She preferred it that way. Her income increased gradually, not explosive, consistent, and consistency felt safer than sudden ascent. Each performance strengthened something inside her, not ego, identity. For the first time since the divorce, she wasn't reacting to his decisions. She was building something of her own. By the third month, Phoenix was no longer a quiet name. Clips of her performances began circulating online, not viral in the sensational sense, but shared in private circles, sent between executives, mentioned in curated newsletters that focused on culture rather than gossip. Her voice carried something people couldn't manufacture. Restraint. She didn't overextend notes to impress. She didn't rely on theatrics. She allowed silence to sit between phrases, trusting the audience to follow her. One night in Tribeca, she introduced an original piece. This one, she said softly into the microphone, is about being called temporary. The room shifted. The first lyric landed low and steady. You built your throne on borrowed loyalty, called me shelter, when the storm was yours, no anger, no pleading, just clarity. Midway through the song, she stepped back from the microphone, and let her voice fill the room naturally, without amplification. It held. People leaned forward without realizing it. At the bar, a venture analyst wiped his eyes discreetly. A woman seated near the front closed hers completely. After the set, a music columnist approached her. "Your work feels personal," he said. "But not exposed. That's intentional," she replied. She began refining her writing. Each song pulled from lived experience without turning into confession. She understood the difference between vulnerability and self-destruction. When venue owners asked about branding, she kept it simple. No tragic backstory, no manufactured mystery, just music. Her audience grew steadily. Not massive, but loyal. And loyalty meant more than applause. She no longer sang to survive. She sang to express strength shaped by pain. In those rooms, she was not someone's former wife. She was Phoenix. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Lily had just finished reviewing rehearsal notes when her phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Lily Carter?" a composed male voice asked. "Yes. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm an estate attorney calling regarding the late Margaret Ellis." The name meant nothing at first. "I'm not sure I know her," Lily replied carefully. "She was your maternal aunt." Silence stretched. Lily's mother had rarely spoken about extended family. There had been distance, complicated history, pride that prevented reconciliation. "I was listed in her will?" Lily asked. "Yes." "You are the sole beneficiary." The number he quoted next felt unreal. Not extravagant beyond imagination, but substantial. Property holdings in Brooklyn, a modest but well-managed investment portfolio, a trust structured for long-term growth. Lily scheduled a meeting the following week. The office sat in downtown Manhattan, understated but reputable. The attorney explained details with precision. Margaret Ellis had been a quiet investor for decades. Conservative, patient, strategic. "She followed your career quietly," he said. "According to her notes, she admired your independence." Lily absorbed the information without visible reaction. No dramatic gasp, no disbelief, just focus. After signing the necessary documents, she stepped outside into the afternoon light and stood still for a moment. This wasn't rescue. It was reinforcement. She didn't rush to spend. She didn't upgrade apartments immediately. Instead, she consulted a financial advisor recommended by the estate firm, reviewed asset allocations, studied market trends, asked detailed questions. She shifted the trust into diversified holdings. She maintained her performances. She kept her queen's apartment for 6 more months. Financial independence didn't change her posture. It clarified it. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Security without attachment. No husband's status, no borrowed influence. Her stability was hers. Quietly, she began investing in small tech startups through private channels, researching founders carefully, examining leadership ethics before growth projections. She did not seek visibility. She built presence, and somewhere in Manhattan's elite circles, whispers began circulating. A private investor, known only as PC, had entered selective funding rounds. Gray had no idea. 6 months after the inheritance meeting, Lily moved. Not into a penthouse, into a brownstone she purchased in Brooklyn Heights. Exposed brick, clean renovation, sunlight pouring through tall windows. A piano positioned near the center of the living room. Intentional. She furnished it simply. No excess. No display purchases meant to signal status. Every choice reflected function and peace. Her schedule changed too. She reduced childcare work entirely, focused on music and investments, structured her week like a professional portfolio manager. Morning market reviews, afternoon rehearsals, evening performances twice a week. Discipline remained her foundation, but something else shifted. Her posture. She walked differently now. Shoulders squared, chin level, no longer scanning rooms for approval. When she entered venues, staff greeted her by name. When she attended private investor meetings under discreet introductions, She spoke with quiet authority. "I'm interested in long-term sustainability," she would say, "not rapid inflation." Founders began requesting her input. She wasn't loud in negotiations. She was precise. Her wardrobe evolved subtly. Structured silhouettes, deep colors, tailored cuts that reflected presence without spectacle. One evening, while reviewing a potential tech investment proposal, she paused and allowed herself to acknowledge something fully. She no longer felt like someone recovering. She felt established. The loss she endured had not diminished her. It refined her, and the woman who once stood outside a glass conference room watching her husband build an empire was gone. In her place stood someone who understood power without becoming consumed by it. She no longer needed to prove permanence. She embodied it. The envelope arrived on a quiet Monday morning. Heavy cardstock, cream-colored, embossed lettering. No return address needed. She recognized the crest immediately. Bradford Holdings. Lily placed it on the kitchen counter beside her coffee and stared at it for a moment before opening it. Inside, the invitation was formal. Gray Bradford and Natalia Vance request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration overlooking the Hudson River. The date was 6 weeks away. Location, a private estate in Westchester County. The event would not be small. It would be public, strategic. She turned the card over. A second note slipped out, handwritten. "We thought you might like to perform. After all, it's the least you can do." N. Lily read it twice. The message was clean, calculated, not an olive branch. A display. Perform at your ex-husband's wedding. Stand on stage while he marries the woman who replaced you. Public humiliation disguised as opportunity. She didn't react immediately. No shattered glass. No dramatic breath. She walked to the window and looked out over Brooklyn Heights. The skyline stretched across the river. Familiar. Steady. Natalia had always understood leverage. This was her attempt at dominance. But the invitation revealed something else, too. Gray had approved it. He had seen her name on that card. He had agreed. Lily folded the note carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We hope you'll accept." It would mean a lot for closure. Closure. The word almost made her smile. Closure is rarely offered by those who caused the wound. It is taken. And in that moment, Lily understood something clearly. They expected her to decline. They expected her pride to protect her. They did not expect her to consider saying yes. Lily walked upstairs to her bedroom and closed the door behind her. She placed the wedding invitation on her dresser, then rested both hands over her stomach. This pregnancy was different, deliberate, protected. After her miscarriage, she had taken time before opening herself to anyone again. When she eventually did, it was with a man who admired her independence and never tried to contain it. The relationship was steady but brief. When she realized their long-term visions didn't align, she ended it without conflict. The child she carried now was not born from desperation or attachment. It was chosen. She had confirmed the pregnancy 2 months earlier. Early medical appointments had gone smoothly. The doctor's voice this time had been calm and reassuring. Healthy progression, strong heartbeat. Each milestone strengthened her. She had not announced it publicly. Only 2 people knew, her physician and her financial advisor for planning purposes. She moved carefully now, adjusted rehearsal schedules, monitored her energy, prioritized rest without sacrificing discipline. She did not romanticize motherhood. She prepared for it. Standing in front of her mirror, she studied her reflection. Her body carried new softness, new weight, new responsibility. But her expression remained composed. The last time she had carried Gray's child, she protected him from truth. This time, she protected her child from instability. No expectation of shared custody drama, no reliance on a man's ego. Just structure, just intention. She picked up the wedding invitation again and considered the optics. A pregnant ex-wife stepping into a billionaire ceremony. It could be read as petty or powerful. The difference would depend on execution. She ran her fingers lightly across her stomach. "You will see strength," she whispered, "not compromise." And whatever decision she made next would not be fueled by emotion. It would be strategic. For 3 days, Lily did not respond. The envelope remained on her desk while she moved through her routine as usual. Morning market analysis, midday rehearsal, evening vocal refinement. But the decision followed her. She considered ignoring it completely. Silence would protect her peace. No confrontation, no spectacle, no reopening old wounds. Then she considered attending quietly as a guest. Observe, leave, prove she was unaffected. But neither option felt complete. She sat at her piano late one night, hands resting on the keys without pressing them. Why does this matter? She asked herself. Not because of Gray, not because of Natalia, because of narrative. Gray had rewritten their history publicly. Successful founder, strategic marriage, forward trajectory. The divorce had been positioned as evolution, her absence erased. If she declined the invitation, that narrative remained untouched. If she accepted on their terms, she risked becoming a prop in someone else's celebration. Revenge tempted her briefly. Expose them, humiliate them, reveal private details in front of investors. But revenge is loud, and loud fades. Closure, however, is precise. She didn't want to destroy his wedding. She wanted truth acknowledged. She remembered the anniversary night, the envelope she never handed him, the child she lost alone. He had called her temporary. The word had lingered for years. Now she had an opportunity, not to beg, not to compete, to redefine permanence. She picked up her phone and typed a short message. I accept the performance invitation, no extra words, no emotion. She pressed send. Then she closed her eyes and let one truth settle clearly. She wasn't going there to sing for them. She was going to stand for herself. The moment she sent the acceptance message, everything shifted from emotion to execution. If she was going to walk into that estate overlooking the Hudson, she would not arrive uncertain. She would arrive deliberate. First, she called her tailor in Brooklyn. I need something structured, she said. Elegant, no excess. They met 2 days later. She chose emerald silk. Not white, not black, not red. Emerald. Strong, regal, unapologetic. The fabric skimmed her frame without clinging. The cut emphasized her posture rather than her pregnancy. It honored her body without turning it into spectacle. Next, she selected minimal diamond studs. No necklace, no statement jewelry competing with her presence. Her hair would fall naturally in soft waves. Makeup refined but understated. She rehearsed the song she intended to perform. Not a love ballad, not a tragic lament, a composition she had written months earlier. Lyrics about dignity, about walking away without breaking, about choosing self-worth over validation. She practiced her speaking voice too, measured, controlled, calm. If she addressed the room, there would be no shaking, no dramatic pauses, just truth. On the morning of the wedding, she stood in her Brooklyn Heights brownstone and looked out at the skyline across the river. 5 years earlier, she had stood in a shared apartment, hoping to secure permanence. Now she stood alone, already whole. She placed one hand gently over her stomach. You are not entering chaos, she whispered. You are entering clarity. When the car arrived to take her to Westchester County, she did not rush. She locked her door, checked her reflection once. Not to adjust appearance, to confirm composure. The emerald dress flowed as she stepped into the vehicle. Back straight, chin level, eyes steady. They invited her to perform. They assumed control. What they failed to anticipate was this. She would not enter as a memory. She would enter as presence. The estate in Westchester County rose above the Hudson like a declaration. Stone facade, iron gates, long private drive lined with manicured hedges and white roses placed at precise intervals. Valet attendants moved with quiet efficiency as black SUVs and luxury sedans arrived in steady rhythm. Inside, the ballroom overlooked the river through towering glass panels. Late afternoon sunlight poured across marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting light across round tables dressed in ivory linen and gold-trimmed glassware. Every detail signaled intention. This was not simply a wedding. It was a statement. Guests arrived in curated waves. Venture capitalists from Silicon Valley, private equity partners from Chicago, 2 state senators, a former cabinet advisor, media executives who shaped financial headlines. Whispers circulated even before the ceremony began. Gray closed another international deal last quarter. They're expanding into Europe. Natalia's advisory connections are strong. Conversations revolved around influence and positioning. Deals were discussed near the champagne bar. Future partnerships hinted at beside the string quartet tuning instruments near the stage. At the center of the ballroom stood the altar. White roses arranged in clean symmetry, gold arch framing the Hudson behind it. Cameras discreetly positioned to capture the vows for select private coverage. Gray Bradford stood near the front, dressed in a custom charcoal suit. Calm, controlled, every movement deliberate. Natalia moved among guests in a fitted ivory gown, greeting donors and board members with practiced warmth. The atmosphere felt polished, strategic, designed for headlines and legacy. Then, a black car pulled into the circular driveway. Conversations near the entrance paused. The valet opened the door. Emerald Silk stepped out first. The moment Lily stepped onto the stone walkway, the air shifted, not loudly, subtly. Heads turned one by one. As recognition traveled through the entrance hall, she moved with calm precision. No hesitation, no searching glance, no sign of uncertainty. The emerald silk dress flowed behind her with controlled grace. The cut framed her pregnancy without apology. Her hand rested lightly at her side. Not defensive, not dramatic. A photographer near the entry paused mid-adjustment. "Is that?" "Yes," someone whispered. "That's Gray's ex-wife. She looks different, stronger, composed, unshaken." Inside the ballroom, murmurs began forming in clusters. She accepted the performance invitation. She actually came. Gray noticed the shift in noise before he saw her. He turned toward the entrance, and for a fraction of a second, his composure fractured. He had expected reluctance. He had expected discomfort. He had not expected confidence. Lily met his eyes across the room. No smile, no anger, just acknowledgement. Natalia followed his line of sight. Her expression froze, then reset, polite, controlled, but her fingers tightened slightly around her bouquet. Lily walked past donors, executives, and political figures without shrinking under scrutiny. Every step carried presence. She was no longer the woman who left with a suitcase and silence. She had returned as someone who understood power and refused to be intimidated by it. When she reached the edge of the ballroom, the orchestra paused briefly before resuming a soft instrumental prelude. Gray descended one step from the altar platform, not yet speaking, just watching. The spectacle had gained an unexpected focal point, and every guest in that room felt it. Gray stepped away from the altar, not rushed, not frantic, measured, but the effort it took to maintain that composure showed in his eyes. He met Lily halfway across the marble floor, just far enough from the main crowd to lower their voices, yet close enough that anyone watching could sense tension. "You came," he said. "You invited me," she replied. His gaze dropped instinctively to her stomach. He hadn't prepared for that. The realization registered slowly. "You're pregnant," he said quietly. "Yes." The single word carried no explanation. He straightened. "Is it?" She held his gaze before he could finish. "It's not your concern." The response was clean, final. Something flickered across his face. Not anger, displacement. For years, he had been the one advancing, rising, expanding. Now he felt outpaced. "You look well," he said, defaulting to civility. "I am. And the performances? I've heard things. I'm selective," she answered. A brief silence settled between them. Behind Gray, investors laughed near the champagne bar. The string quartet shifted into a softer melody. Life continued. But between them, history pressed forward. "You didn't have to accept," he said. "I know." He studied her expression. "You're not here to create a scene." It wasn't a question. She tilted her head slightly. "That depends on your definition of a scene." Before he could respond, Natalia approached. Her smile appeared composed. "We're glad you could join us," she said. Lily turned to her. "Thank you for the invitation." Natalia's eyes moved briefly to Lily's stomach, then back to her face. "Your timing is interesting," Natalia said. "So is yours," Lily replied. The tension was subtle, controlled, but undeniable. Gray cleared his throat. "The performance is scheduled after the ceremony. I'll be ready," Lily said. She stepped back slightly, reclaiming space. Gray watched her walk toward the stage area reserved for musicians. For the first time that afternoon, he felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. The ceremony concluded under controlled applause. Vows exchanged, rings placed, cameras flashing discreetly. Gray and Natalia turned toward their guests as husband and wife. The applause lingered. Then the event coordinator stepped toward the stage microphone. "We now invite a special musical performance," she announced. All eyes shifted. Lily rose from her seat with calm intention. She walked toward the grand piano positioned near the edge of the ballroom, overlooking the Hudson through towering glass panels. The river moved steadily beyond the windows, indifferent to spectacle. The pianist nodded once. The first chord settled softly into the room. Lily closed her eyes briefly before beginning. Her voice entered low, controlled, every syllable precise. "I stood beside a dream not yet born," held the weight before it wore a crown. The ballroom quieted completely. No clinking glasses, no whispered conversations, only listening. She didn't raise her volume for effect. She allowed stillness to amplify her presence. "You built your rise on borrowed hands," called it vision, called it plan. Across the room, Gray remained still. Natalia's posture stiffened slightly. Lily's voice climbed gradually, never strained, never pleading. "I was shelter when the storm was yours, you called me anchor." Then cut the cord. Several guests exchanged glances. The lyrics carried implication without accusation. No names, no spectacle, just truth, shaped into melody. Midway through the performance, she shifted tone. Not softer, stronger. "I learned that love without respect is a contract I won't sign again." A woman near the front row pressed a hand to her mouth. A board member lowered his gaze. Lily stepped away from the piano for the final verse, allowing her voice to carry without accompaniment. "I was never temporary. I was the foundation you outgrew." The last note lingered in the air, not dramatic, not desperate, just complete. Silence followed. Then applause, not polite, not forced, earned. Gray felt it in that moment. This was not entertainment. This was positioning. And the room understood it. The applause had not fully faded when Lily lifted her hand. The room quieted again. She stepped closer to the microphone. "There's something else I want to say," she began. No tremor, no rush. Gray's attention sharpened immediately. Natalia's smile thinned. Lily scanned the ballroom slowly. "You've all gathered here to celebrate legacy," she said. "Growth, alignment, power." A few guests shifted in their seats. "I understand those things," she continued. "I've lived beside them." Gray felt the temperature in the room shift. Lily's gaze found him. "You once told me I was temporary." A murmur spread. "You said I didn't fit the future you were building." Gray's jaw tightened. Lily did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I believed in that future when it had no funding," she said. When the office windows were cracked and rejection emails filled the inbox, several early investors in the room recognized the reference. "I stood beside ambition before it became image." The words landed with clarity. "This performance wasn't about nostalgia," she added. "It was about context." Gray took one step forward instinctively. "Lily," she lifted her hand gently. "Let me finish." The authority in her tone silenced him. She turned back to the guests. "When success arrives, it reveals character. Silence deepened. And tonight isn't about disrupting a wedding. She paused deliberately. It's about correcting a narrative. The ballroom held its breath. Lily's fingers tightened slightly around the microphone. There's something no one in this room knows, she said. Gray's chest rose sharply. The air felt thinner. The night he asked for a divorce, she continued, steady and composed, I was pregnant. The words did not echo loudly. They settled, heavy. Immediate reactions rippled through the front rows. Natalia's posture shifted, her eyes snapping toward Gray. Gray's face drained of color. You never told me, he said under his breath. You never asked, she replied. The exchange was quiet, but the room felt it. Lily faced the guests again. I planned to tell him that night, she said. I had the ultrasound image folded inside an envelope on our anniversary table. Several guests exchanged stunned looks. I left without saying anything. I chose dignity over pleading. She inhaled once, measured. 3 months later, I lost that child. The silence that followed felt almost physical. No one moved. I went to the hospital alone, she said. Signed paperwork alone. Walked back into an empty apartment alone. Gray took another step forward, his voice strained. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes met his. Because you made it clear I was temporary. A woman near the back wiped tears from her face. Lily rested her free hand gently over her stomach. I am pregnant again, she said calmly. Not with regret, not with desperation. With intention. The distinction mattered. This time, I am not building a future with someone who measures worth by optics. Gray's shoulders lowered slightly, the weight of realization settling in. The audience no longer saw a performance. They saw truth. And truth, once spoken publicly, cannot be repositioned. The room had not recovered from the pregnancy revelation when Lily continued. And since we're speaking about legacy, she said calmly, we should speak about loyalty. Natalia's expression tightened. Gray looked between them. What are you doing? He asked, quietly. Clarifying, Lily replied. She reached into her clutch and removed a thin envelope. Clean, structured, professional. I invest now, she said to the room. Quietly, selectively, a murmur moved through the investors in attendance. When you operate in private markets, patterns become visible. Natalia's voice cut in, controlled but sharp. This is inappropriate. Lily ignored her. There are offshore transfers connected to advisory accounts, she continued. Transfers that coincide with strategic leaks to competitors. Gray's head turned slowly toward Natalia. What is she talking about? Natalia laughed lightly, but the sound lacked ease. She's speculating. Lily removed a set of printed documents and held them at her side. I don't speculate, she said. I verify. She stepped forward once, placing the envelope on a nearby table where several board members stood frozen. These transfers originate from shell entities linked to your advisory network, she said, addressing Natalia directly. Funds rerouted before acquisition announcements. Competitors positioning themselves ahead of your expansion, the implications hit instantly. Gray's voice lowered. Is this true? Natalia's composure fractured. This is a private matter, she said. Not for public display. Is it true? Gray repeated. Several investors leaned closer to the documents now resting on the table. The wedding no longer resembled celebration. It resembled exposure. Lily's tone remained measured. You replaced loyalty with image, she said to Gray. Be careful not to confuse validation with integrity. Natalia stepped back slightly, recalculating. You're trying to ruin this, she said. No, Lily answered. You did that yourself. Gray stared at the paperwork without touching it. For the first time since the ceremony began, he looked uncertain, not as a groom, but as a CEO. The ballroom no longer felt grand. It felt exposed. Investors who had arrived to celebrate were now scanning financial documents. Conversations turned from congratulatory to cautious. A board member leaned toward Gray. We need to review this immediately. Another whispered, if this is accurate, we're vulnerable. Natalia's bridal composure dissolved into calculation. "This is a misunderstanding," she insisted. "Competitive firms manipulate timing all the time." "From your accounts?" one investor asked sharply. She didn't answer. Gray finally picked up the documents. His hands were steady. His eyes were not. He scanned numbers, dates, transaction trails. He recognized the timing of certain acquisitions. He remembered confidential discussions. He remembered who had been present. The realization hit slowly. Not loud, not explosive, personal. He looked at Natalia. "How long?" he asked. She said nothing. Silence can confirm more than confession. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely. Guests stood in clusters now, no longer pretending this was a reception. It was a reckoning. Gray's attention shifted back to Lily, not in anger, in recognition. He saw her differently in that moment, not as someone he had outgrown, as someone he had underestimated. "You knew," he said quietly. "I verified," she replied. He stepped closer. "You could have told me privately and allowed the narrative to continue publicly," she asked. He had no answer. The wedding planner whispered urgently into a headset. Security hovered near the perimeter, unsure whether to intervene. Natalia removed her bouquet slowly and placed it on a nearby table. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Lily agreed. "It's just revealed." Gray stood still, surrounded by investors now asking difficult questions. For years, he had equated control with power. Tonight, he felt something unfamiliar: consequences. And the one person he once called temporary had become the most stable presence in the room. The ballroom had fractured into tension and whispered calculations. Gray stepped away from the cluster of board members and faced Natalia fully. "Look at me," he said. She held his gaze, but the calm she had perfected for years was thinning. "This is exaggerated," she replied. "Competitive markets are aggressive. Timing overlaps." He held up the documents. "These are shell transfers routed through your advisory network. Advisors manage capital," she said quickly. "That doesn't make me responsible for every movement." "You had access to internal timelines," Gray pressed. "You were in acquisition meetings. So were dozens of executives," she countered. Her voice was still sharp, still defensive, but no longer composed. A senior investor stepped closer. "If confidential information was leaked, this isn't just optics," he said. "This is liability." Natalia's jaw tightened. "You're all reacting emotionally," she said. "This is a wedding." Gray's expression shifted. "No," he said slowly. "This was supposed to be a merger." The word hung there, not romance. Alignment. She swallowed. "You needed someone who fit your image," she replied. "I fit it. At what cost?" he asked. Her composure cracked. "At the cost of playing the game better than you do," she shot back. "You think loyalty built your empire. Strategy did." The admission wasn't direct, but it was enough. Board members exchanged looks. Investors began stepping aside, already calculating exposure. Gray stared at her, the weight of his choices settling in. "You positioned yourself beside me," he said quietly. "Yes," she answered, "because you were rising." "And if I fall?" She didn't answer. That silence confirmed more than any statement. Across the room, Lily watched without triumph, without gloating, just clarity. Gray turned slightly, the realization spreading across his face. He had traded grounding for validation. And validation, when built on calculation, fractures under pressure. The noise of the ballroom faded into the background. Gray's focus shifted past Natalia, past the investors, past the unraveling optics. It settled on Lily. She stood near the stage, composed, one hand resting lightly over her stomach. Not shaking, not triumphant, present. For the first time in years he saw clearly. When his office windows were cracked and his inbox filled with rejection, she had been there. When early investors dismissed him, she stayed. When he doubted himself at night, she steadied him. She had not praised his ego. She had strengthened his foundation. Natalia fit the image. Lily built the substance. He remembered the anniversary dinner now, the candles, the unopened envelope beside his wine glass, the way she had walked out without screaming. He had interpreted that as weakness. It was discipline. "You said I didn't fit your future," Lily had told him earlier. Now he understood the irony. She had always been the future. Not because of status, because of integrity. He looked down at the financial documents still in his hand, then back at her. "You carried that alone," he said quietly. "Yes." The simplicity of her answer cut deeper than accusation. He had been chasing legacy in boardrooms, while she had been protecting it in silence. Investors continued whispering nearby, but his focus remained locked on one truth: he had mistaken elevation for evolution. He had confused admiration with alignment, and in doing so, he had dismissed the only person who loved him before power reshaped him. Gray stepped toward Lily slowly, not as a CEO, not as a groom, as a man stripped of leverage. Guests parted instinctively, forming a quiet corridor between them. He stopped an arm's length away. "I was wrong," he said. The words felt foreign in his mouth. Lily did not respond. He glanced briefly at her stomach again, then back at her eyes. "I let ambition distort everything," he continued. "I measured worth by how rooms reacted to me." "You did," she said calmly. "I thought scale meant replacing what no longer matched the image," he admitted. "And now?" she asked. "Now I see I replaced stability with applause." His voice lowered further. "I made decisions like contracts," he said. "I treated our marriage like positioning." Silence held. Then, in front of board members, investors, political donors, and the woman he had just married, Gray Bradford did something no one expected. He dropped to his knees. Not theatrically, not violently, slowly. The marble floor reflected the image back to the entire room. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Please," he said, voice strained. "Let me fix this." Natalia's breath caught audibly behind him. Gray didn't look back. "I can undo the legal mistake," he continued. "I can correct the damage. I can—" "You can't undo who you became," Lily interrupted. He closed his eyes briefly. "I know," he said, "but I can change." "You said that before success," she replied. His shoulders lowered. "This time, I understand the cost." He reached for her hand, not to claim it, to ask. The entire ballroom watched. A billionaire kneeling, not for spectacle, for forgiveness. Lily looked down at him, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with clarity. "You're kneeling now," she said quietly. Because the room shifted. His jaw tightened slightly. "That's not fair. It's accurate." He swallowed. "I didn't understand what I had." "You understood," she corrected. "You just believed you could replace it." The distinction landed. He lowered his gaze. "I was afraid of being small," he admitted. "And you became smaller," she replied. A few guests wiped their eyes. Others stood frozen, witnessing a man confront the cost of his own choices. Gray's voice cracked for the first time. "I loved you. You loved how I made you feel when you had nothing," she said. "But when you had everything, you chose image." She stepped back slightly, maintaining space. "You can't fix what you never valued." The words did not echo loudly. They settled. Permanent. He remained on his knees. "Is there no way forward?" he asked. "There is," she answered. Hope flickered in his expression. "It just doesn't include me beside you." The finality was gentle, not cruel. She placed her hand over her stomach once more. "My child will grow up seeing strength," she continued, "not compromise." She turned without drama, without hesitation, emerald silk moving steadily across the marble floor. Guests parted again, but this time not in shock. In respect, no one stopped her. No one spoke. The doors opened. Cool evening air met her face as she stepped outside. Behind her, inside a ballroom designed for celebration, a billionaire remained on his knees. The wedding footage never aired. What circulated instead were financial headlines. Bradford Holdings launches internal investigation. Advisory ties under review. Board demands transparency. Natalia disappeared from public view within weeks. Legal teams replaced photographers. Damage control replaced celebration. Gray remained CEO, but the shine had dimmed. Board oversight increased. Investors demanded stricter reporting structures. Private meetings replaced public appearances. For the first time in years, Gray stopped chasing expansion. He started auditing himself. Late nights in his penthouse overlooking the Hudson felt different now. Not triumphant, reflective. He replayed the anniversary dinner, the unopened envelope. The words he chose too carelessly, temporary. The word echoed louder in solitude than it ever had in conflict. He began restructuring his company culture. Accountability frameworks, ethics reviews, transparency policies. It wasn't redemption. It was responsibility, but the absence remained. Some lessons do not reverse. They reshape. Across the river, in a Brooklyn Heights brownstone filled with morning light, Lily held her newborn son for the first time. Strong lungs, steady heartbeat, healthy. She did not cry dramatically. She smiled, soft, certain. There were no cameras, no strategic announcements, no headlines. Just quiet joy in a home built by intention. She named him Elias, not after legacy, after strength. She continued performing selectively, though less frequently now. Her investments grew steadily. Her voice deepened further with time, not from grief, but from grounding. When Elias grew old enough to ask about his father, she did not poison the answer. She told him the truth. Some people learn late, she said. But you will learn early. Gray sent one letter, not asking for reconciliation, acknowledging fault. Lily read it once, then placed it in a drawer. Closure does not always require reunion. Sometimes it requires understanding. The guests who attended that wedding still speak about it, not because of scandal, because of clarity. They witnessed something rare, a woman choosing dignity over access. A man realizing power without integrity collapses. A room full of influence, humbled by truth. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Ambition without loyalty empties success. Image without character destroys stability. And anyone who calls you temporary was never meant to define your permanence. If this ending moved you, like this video, comment the one lesson that stood out most to you. And subscribe to Mr. Victor Storytime for more stories where truth confronts power and dignity wins. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a reckoning. And some reckonings change more than one life. Before we close this story completely, let this sink in. There will be moments in your life when you are underestimated. Moments when someone decides you no longer fit their version of success. Moments when your loyalty is rewritten as convenience. When your love is reduced to timing, when your sacrifice is erased from the narrative. Do not collapse in those moments. Stand, because being dismissed does not reduce your value. It reveals their limitation. Lily was not weak when she walked away without exposing her pregnancy. She was disciplined. She refused to beg for permanence from someone who had already decided she was temporary. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is packing one suitcase. Sometimes it is rebuilding quietly. Sometimes it is walking into a room designed to humiliate you and owning it instead. Gray chased power. Lily built character. Power can be rented. Character must be earned. If someone leaves you at your lowest, let them. If someone chooses image over integrity, let them. If someone mistakes your loyalty for dependency, let them. You are not defined by who discards you. You are defined by how you rise. Never shrink to fit a future that excludes your dignity. Never compete for a position that should have been yours by respect. Never silence your truth to protect someone else's comfort. Build yourself so completely that rejection becomes redirection. And when the moment comes for you to stand in your own strength, stand without bitterness. Because the greatest revenge is not destruction, it is elevation. The world will always celebrate power, but history remembers character. Choose wisely which one you build.